Dr. Travis. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Ripple Effect with Ray podcast. I'm really excited to get to know you, chat with you, and learn all about Bioinsights. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, tell me how and why. Tell me about Bioinsights and why you got started doing it.
I've been in allopathic medicine since the late 90s, and so I've had an affinity to heal people. And it was sort of a very unique, sort of kind of turning point in my life in that in January of 2018, our house caught on fire. And so for 9 months, you live out of the house as they rebuild the house. And when we moved back in about a month later, my wife would climb the top of the stairs and just sit there, sweating, and she just she couldn't catch her breath. And so that was sort of obviously very concerning. She was in her late 40s and we had a pretty large family. And so she was very active. About 8 months later, after some 20 plus providers and nearly 30 different visits, no one knew why. And it wasn't the why that the next step was your lungs are failing, you need new ones. And so on a Monday morning, she presented herself at our local trauma hospital to be worked up for 2 new lungs from some unknown donor. It was during that week where I was completely befuddled that, I spent my life in medicine and in the course of doing so, knew some of the smartest people out there, right? And as a result, I thought, well, how is this, this sort of idiopathic, which is a very sort of clever word for we have no idea, was now sort of front and center in my life. And it was during morning, I was working in New York. I was overlooking the Hudson. I was just doing a morning devotional. And literally the voice came into my head, did you check the couches? And so this sort of out of nowhere, seemingly random thought. And so I text my wife back here in Florida and I said, hey, did you look what the couches are made of? And she returned a text and it said 100% bird feathers. And so that was important because of all those doctors that my family or my wife had, one was really old and really old schooled, right? And it was not fancy machines, but he kept asking the question every time she would see him is, do you have birds at home? Because to him, he had seen throughout his many years of practicing that environmental toxins are a thing. And environmental toxins don't necessarily show up on tests, and people never really asked the question. But yes, it did turn out that we did not have birds. We just happened to have 2 giant couches that were nothing but birds. So the offending couches were removed. And then a course of several months of just these steroids, right, she was better. And so that really was kind of my first sort of foray, if you will, of being outside the picture frame of Western medicine. And it was then of saying, okay, I'm just curious, as I'm starting to now run this internal monologue, how many people have died of couches? How many people have perhaps been influenced by something in their home that they thought it was part of their family, yet it was the silent killer? It was then a couple months later that we sort of turned more healthy, if you will, and became functionally medically, or what I would call functional medicine aware. And my wife then went to a functional medicine specialist, and she had a host of just sort of underlying conditions that had been annoyances, but otherwise were pretty apparent in terms of just having to cope with them since her teenage years. And about 3 or 4 months later, she was well. And so now I basically have her at the foot of death. Then from just, okay, I'm dealing with sort of chronic issues of PCOS, endometriosis, and other things, since teenage years, to now I'm better. So she's at 51, healthier than she's ever been. And we now have sort of 2 data points. And 2 data points are basically saying allopathic medicine have missed these 2 big ones. And then it was kind of in the third and final strike, if you will, and why now I've been passionate about functional medicine, is I then talked to my wife's functional medicine specialist. I was made to be aware of the fact that when labs are looked at, that there is another dimension within the curve of normal called optimal. And it was then where I was like, well, I'd never heard in all the years of med school and training that there was something called an optimal lab value. I was always told that if it was normal, it was normal, and normal indicated okay. But from a functional medicine perspective, it's like, no, there is a real optimal value for gender and age as it relates to many biomarkers. And some even get into, micro level of sort of tweaking that based upon even elevation or where a woman would be within her cycle. And so that to me was kind of the combination of 3 data points that basically said, a lot of things hide in normal, which allopathic medicine is missing. And allopathic is focused on symptoms. They're not looking at root causes, which could, in my wife's case, be a couch. And so, yeah, those are the things that sort of really led me into and has made me excited to really say that there are paths to actually curing people optimal health versus in sort of just following the symptom trail.
That's incredible. I mean, we sometimes question why certain things happen, but it's never by accident. Everything always happens the way that it's supposed to, right? I mean, it sucks that it happened at like, almost like the expense of your wife, but thank God you were able to find the root cause and now she's the healthiest she's ever been. That's amazing and also so inspiring. I hope she writes a book. So, as far as what you've been seeing trending in the industry, what have you noticed?
I think that, especially here in the US, and I would dare say the rest of the world, I think COVID really brought healthcare and the things that impact health, and I would say the overlap of society behavior, right? Is that a lot of sort of questioning, a lot of division happened. Those that looked at sort of root cause and natural, those that sort of reacted in the most sort of strong possible sense. Wear a mask, 6 foot distancing, don't get on airplanes, get as many shots and boosters as humanly possible. Really created not just a division, but I think it aligned with how we sort of see life. Do we sort of see it in a way that says perhaps that there's a creator of the universe, that for every disease that might be out there, there might also be a cure? Are we just sort of the plight and we are somehow victims of our own demise through industrialization and other things? But I think what it did is it sort of put people into the mindset that health is not health or a lack of health can happen to you whether you want to or not. And I think that as a result, many people have now said, my health insurance doesn't necessarily tie to healthy outcomes. And so as a result, you see things like the weight loss drugs that have been effective and other things, and these things that now require you to pay out of pocket. It is that sort of now dimension of capitalism that says, it's not covered by insurance, but if you want to pay for it, then there's a whole nother world of healthcare, like an entirely whole new planet. It's literally almost like going into a virtual world, if you will. And it is this world that's now between 80 and $100 billion a year market, and it's growing between 20 and 22% per year. And what that really means is that I think that the market is shifting to those that feel that there are alternatives to just treating symptoms. If I have diabetes, there may very well be a treatment out there to cure me of my diabetes. If I have high blood pressure, I don't necessarily have to go on heart medications. And so I think what really happens in sort of the final nail on this is that once you have somebody that went off of their medications and is healthier, that becomes a very loud voice and it becomes a hard data point for you to really sort of argue with in terms of yourself. Because I don't think really people want to take pills. And for every pill, there's usually like a 200-page down in very, very small font of side effects. So I think where I see the world and going is that there is now solid traction post-COVID for lifestyle, longevity, and functional or alternative medicine. And I think that train has now left the station and it will be impossible to ever pull it back in.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's such an important trend or shift in what I would consider the right direction. And I think we used to rely on Western medicine, put all of our trust into it 100%, rather than trying to, I think, incorporate both approaches. I'm not here to tell you, don't take the pill. No, I am somebody who is a proponent of the both and, right? Like, I am somebody who is on currently anti-seizure meds. So I'm not here to lead anyone astray that, like, hey, we just need functional medicine and that's going to be your cure all. No, we need all of it. And it's the holistic approach and taking that side of things. So what do you feel like has been working well in Bioinsights and what do you feel like has been more frustrating?
I think what has worked well is that I think that we have, what is known as quote unquote your product market fit, meaning do you build a thing kind of like the Field of Dreams? If you build it where they come. And what we've really seen is that there is a definitive appetite for those who want to practice functional medicine techniques and approaches. And so we've seen, market traction. What I think I've also seen that's been just very interesting is that is sort of almost this band or segment of users of those that I would call the renewed hope, right? There are those that, there might be already in some kind of form of alternative medicine, like chiropractic. They might be pharmacists. They might be sort of these people that are within sort of the health spectrum of caregivers. And they're like, is there a way to sort of lean in and actually see something more, right, in greater levels of health? And so that's what we've seen lately is just a massive level of providers across the entire spectrum saying, wow, system has 300 protocols and it's using all this math and AI to basically tell me which protocol is a statistical likely candidate. And so that's been exciting. I think there's always a two-edged sword in software development is that everybody always will say, oh, I wish it does this. And so there's no way you'll ever satisfy everybody. So I think what has probably been, if anything, frustrating is that where do we draw the lines, right? Do we add on peptides? Do we add on ozone, red light therapy? So where does that expanding universe of longevity and biohacking and so forth, how does that really sort of get codified into a clinical decision-making product? I think it's a neat problem to have, but I think there are some frustrations, but I think they're sort of at the good to have frustrations. I think though what we've seen work is that when we license a copy of our software, literally just before this podcast, I said, okay, we're ready. We'll bring you live on Monday. And she's like, well, isn't there any chance I can go live today? Well, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday. And so when you see the eagerness of really wanting to lean in and get started, I mean, those are sort of encouraging signals. And it means I think that people really want the opportunity to be a strong proponent in a person's optimal health. I mean, I think that's just sort of generally aligns with most of humanity. And I think giving somebody the tools to do that in a way that doesn't have an arm's length level of side effects is a good thing.
Absolutely. I think it's a trend in the right direction. Kind of what we touched on before is I feel like more and more people are taking responsibility for their own health, right? They're not just settling on a 10 to 15-minute doctor's appointment that tells them, hey, like, sorry, I can't do anything for you, or stay on birth control or whatever it might be. And instead, recognizing the power of getting started and really taking charge of their health. What would you say, or where do you hope to be in the next couple years?
Well, I think my ultimate goal is that maybe we do this podcast in 3 years and you say, hey, I heard something, I read something in Fortune and it says functional medicine runs on Bioinsights. So I think Oracle and SAP and Salesforce, they get sort of their own little moniker about, the segment they own. I think for me, it's not just sort of building a technology company, but what I hope will ultimately happen is that there's a community of users that have not only just used a piece of technology, but have gone in and customized protocols and added their own in such a way that we have solid outcome data. And to me, it will be a great day when I start to see people that are publishing data from the outcomes of the technology, because I think that's the only path to where we sort of get to proverbially be invited from the kids' table into the adult table of healthcare, where we can sit there and say, look, we have repeatable, predictable scientific evidence that these set of endpoints that we were looking for to cure and to bring about optimal health had happened. And it happened in a population that met all of the sort of complex sort of scientific rigor. I think when we've now closed the loop, that people are actually looking at outcome data using our technology, that to me will probably be that's it. I mean, at that point, anything after that is just sort of you've already gone to the moon. There's no real place to go. But I think there is line of sight in that. We're also involved in MAHA and doing things with the government, and I think we have things that are happening at the governmental level where everybody is sort of looking for that same goal. How do we sit there and really start to make healthcare, the delivery of healthcare, and expectations of outcomes? How do we start to sit there and say, okay, there's not just one path, right? There's multiple paths, and how do we get to it and learn the best of all worlds, such that we are actually returning people to health versus just putting them on a pharma subscription plan for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. I love that the moon is not the dream, is the destination. right? Like, hey, we're going there, and that's where we see our trajectory. And I very, very much look forward to having you on the podcast. I mean, hopefully in a year, 2 years, 3 years, all of the above, and just see kind of where you're at. Where can people find you and how can they work with you?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So we have our website. So it's bioinsights with an s.com. My email is just travis@bioinsights.com, and certainly encourage anyone that wants to be part of a community that looks to operationalize some predictable way of looking at people and pointing them or connecting them to the right sort of protocol. We're certainly looking not only for contributors and scientific initiatives that we're doing in terms of advisory committees. Certainly, we're looking for people that says, "Look, I'm in functional medicine, but I kind of just have a basket junk drawer full of technology that runs our office. Give us an opportunity to work for you and see that can we put in a clinical operating system like Bioinsights to really help you streamline." And I think lastly, just being a part of the community and continuing to just really echo the fact that there are pathways for actually optimal health. And so I think many of us that continue to just sing along that same sheet of music, really, that's the sort of tide that floats all boats.
Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Travis, Dr. Bond. Love all of the names that you can go by. Thank you again.
Thank you.